The forest holds its breath. A figure moves through the undergrowth, each step calculated, each movement deliberate. He is a shadow among shadows, a whisper among whispers. The wooden bow in his hand, crafted from a single piece of hickory, is an extension of his arm. The bone-tipped arrows in his quiver, each one meticulously shaped and balanced, wait silently for their moment. In the frontier wilderness of early America, where survival hung by the thinnest of threads, the bowhunter was a master of life and death, of patience and precision, of ancient wisdom adapted to a savage new world. The crack of a rifle might echo for miles, announcing a hunter's presence to everything within earshot, friend, foe, or prey. But the whisper of an arrow's flight was heard only by its target, and often too late. In a land where ammunition was precious and noise could bring unwanted attention, the silent hunter held advantages that no firearm could match. This wasn't merely hunting, it was an intricate dance of stealth, skill, and survival that demanded complete harmony with the natural world. From the dense forests of the Appalachians to the vast plains beyond, frontiersmen who mastered the bow carried forward an ancient tradition while adapting it to the unique challenges of the American wilderness. Their methods weren't just effective, they were essential, a critical bridge between the old world and the new, between native wisdom and frontier necessity. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Part 1. The Wooden Symphony, Crafting the Frontier Bow. The bow, that deceptively simple curve of wood, was anything but simple in its making. Frontiersmen who adopted bow hunting, whether by necessity or choice, understood that the weapon's effectiveness began long before the hunt itself. It began with the careful selection of materials and meticulous crafting process. While many relied on trade for firearms, the bow could be created from the very forest that sustained them. The selection of wood was critical, not just any tree would do. Osage orange, known to many as bois d'arc, wood of the bow, was prized above all others when available. Its dense, resilient nature made it ideal for withstanding the repeated stress of drawing and release. As one frontier journal noted, the Osage bow, properly cured and shaped, holds its strength through countless hunts and seems to grow only more responsive with use. In regions where Osage was unavailable, hickory, ash, and maple served as worthy alternatives. The frontiersman would select a straight section of trunk or branch, ideally one that had already begun to season naturally. The outer sapwood provided tensile strength, while the inner heartwood resisted compression, a natural composite that, when properly aligned with the bow's design, created a powerful and durable weapon. The crafting process was an exercise in patience. After rough shaping the stave, the bowyer would carefully remove wood, constantly checking the flexibility and balance. Too much removed from one area would create a weak point. Too little would result in a stiff, inefficient bow. As James Fenimore Cooper described through his character Hawkeye, the bow must bend evenly like the finest steel, yet return true as an arrow's flight. Unlike the composite bows of the Plains tribes, which combined wood, horn, and sinew in complex layered designs, most frontier bows were self-bows, made from a single piece of wood. This simplicity made them more practical to create and maintain in the field, though at some cost to raw power. A skilled bowyer could complete a functional bow in a few days of dedicated work, though the finest examples might represent weeks of careful shaping, tillering, balancing the limbs, and finishing. The bowstring presented its own challenges. Ideally made from sinew, animal tendon that had been dried, separated into fibers, and twisted into cord, it required significant preparation. Hemp or flax fibers served as alternatives, though they lacked the natural elasticity of sinew. The string needed to be strong enough to withstand hundreds of draws, yet light enough not to impede the arrow's flight. As we demonstrated in our video on frontier cordage, the proper preparation of natural fibers was a critical skill that extended far beyond just bow making. The finished bow was often treated with animal fats or oils to protect it from moisture, a critical consideration in the humid eastern forests. Some frontier bowyers added subtle details, carved handholds, decorative notches, or even inlaid designs, but function always preceded form. A frontier bow was, above all else, a tool for survival. What made these wooden weapons so valuable was their self-sufficiency. Unlike firearms that required a constant supply of powder and lead, a well-made bow could serve for years with only occasional maintenance and the crafting of new strings. In the isolation of the frontier, where supply lines were tenuous at best, this independence from external resources could mean the difference between hunger and plenty, between vulnerability and security. Part 2. Bone and sinew, the deadly precision of frontier arrows. If the bow was the instrument, the arrow was the song, and on the frontier, that song was often composed with bone. While metal arrowheads were prized when available, the resourceful frontiersman could craft deadly effective points from the very animals he hunted, creating a cycle of use that wasted nothing from the precious game taken. Bone points offered distinct advantages beyond mere availability. They could be crafted anywhere with minimal tools, they were surprisingly durable, and they could be shaped to penetrate deeply or create devastating wound channels. As one account from a Kentucky long hunter described, an arrow tipped with bone from a deer's leg, properly shaped and hardened by fire, will pass clean through a buck at 30 paces and can be recovered and used again where a lead ball might be lost. The crafting of bone points was a meticulous process. The densest bones, typically leg bones from deer, elk, or bison, were split and shaped using stone or metal tools. The resulting splinters were ground against sandstone to create sharp edges and tapered points. Many were then hardened by careful heating in hot ashes, which increased their strength and penetrating power without making them brittle. The most skilled arrow makers could produce points that rivaled metal for effectiveness, particularly at the closer ranges typical of forest hunting. The arrow shaft itself required equal attention. Straight shoots of dogwood, ash, or river cane were gathered, dried, and carefully straightened using heat and pressure. As we explored in our video on primitive tools, a simple arrow straightener made from a notched piece of antler or bone allowed precise adjustments to ensure true flight. The finished shafts were typically cut to match the archer's draw length, usually between 24 and 30 inches. Fletching, the feathers that stabilized the arrow's flight, was typically taken from wild turkeys, whose large wing and tail feathers provided ideal material. 3 feathers were standard, stripped down one side of the quill and attached with sinew or plant fiber adhesive in a slight spiral pattern that imparted spin to the arrow, much like the rifling in a gun barrel. This spin stabilized the arrow's flight and dramatically improved accuracy. The nock, the notch that held the arrow to the string, was cut with particular care, as a poorly shaped nock could cause the arrow to fly erratically or even damage the bow. Many frontier arrows featured reinforced nocks, with sinew wrappings preventing the wood from splitting under the pressure of release. Perhaps most impressive was the method of attaching the bone point to the shaft. A socket was carefully carved into the forward end of the shaft, and the point was secured using a combination of pine pitch or spruce resin mixed with beeswax and charcoal powder. This natural adhesive was then reinforced with tightly wrapped sinew, which would shrink as it dried, creating a nearly unbreakable bond. Some hunters added subtle details to this wrapping, using dyed sinew in patterns that identified their arrows, a primitive form of signature that could resolve disputes over who had taken a particular animal. The complete arrow represented hours of work, which explains why hunters were so diligent about recovering them after a shot. A well-made set of arrows was a valuable possession, and frontiersmen often carried a diverse selection for different game and conditions: heavier, broader points for large game, and lighter, sharper points for small game and birds. Part 3. The Art of Invisibility, Stealth Techniques of the Frontier. Bowhunter. The frontier bowhunter's greatest weapon wasn't his bow or arrows. It was his ability to become invisible. In a world where prey animals had evolved heightened senses to detect predators, and where indigenous hunters had perfected the art of stealth over thousands of years, success demanded nothing less than complete concealment of sight, sound, and scent. Movement was the enemy of stealth, and the frontier hunter developed a distinctive way of walking that we might call fox walking today. Each step began with the toe touching down first, then gradually transferring weight to the heel, allowing the hunter to feel for twigs or leaves that might snap before committing his full weight. As one trapper's journal from the 1790s noted, "The Indian moves through the thickest brush like a ghost, placing each foot with such care that not even a mouse would be disturbed. Any white man who wishes to fill his pot with meat would do well to learn this method of walking." This careful movement was paired with an acute awareness of wind direction. Experienced hunters would carry a small pouch of fine ash or milkweed fluff to test the air currents constantly, ensuring they remained downwind of their quarry. They understood that a deer or elk could detect human scent from hundreds of yards away, making all other stealth techniques irrelevant if the wind betrayed their presence. Clothing choices were critical to both visual and auditory concealment. Buckskin, which we explored in detail in our video on frontier clothing, offered the perfect combination of durability and silence. Unlike wool or linen, properly tanned buckskin wouldn't rustle with movement, and its natural coloration blended well with the forest environment. Many hunters added elements of camouflage long before the concept had a name, attaching strips of cloth or leather in browns and greens to break up their outline, or wearing garments adorned with natural materials from their hunting grounds. The frontier hunter's approach to concealment went beyond mere technique. It was a state of mind. As one Shawnee hunter reportedly instructed an apprentice frontiersman, "You must think like the deer to hunt the deer. Your mind must become quiet like still water. The deer feels a noisy mind even when your body makes no sound." This psychological dimension of hunting represented a profound shift for European-descended frontiersmen who had to unlearn generations of hunting traditions to adopt this more intimate, patient approach. Timing played a crucial role in the stealth hunter's success. Dawn and dusk, what modern hunters call the magic hours, offered optimal conditions when animals were active, but visibility still favored the hunter. Many frontier bow hunters would move into position well before first light, becoming part of the landscape before their prey began to stir. This required extraordinary patience, sometimes sitting motionless for hours in uncomfortable positions. Weather conditions were carefully considered. A light rain provided multiple advantages. It dampened the sound of movement, washed away human scent, and caused game to focus more on feeding than on detecting predators. Windy days offered similar benefits, with the movement of branches and rustling leaves masking the hunter's approach. As we demonstrated in our video on reading weather signs, the frontier hunter was a meteorologist by necessity, reading clouds and wind patterns to select the optimal time for the hunt. Perhaps most impressive was the frontier bow hunter's ability to use natural sound to mask his movements. They would time their steps to coincide with the calls of birds, the rustling of wind gusts, or even the movements of other animals. This opportunistic approach turned potential obstacles into advantages, demonstrating the adaptive intelligence that characterized frontier survival. Part 4. The Killing Zone. The Art of Close-Range Shooting. For the frontier bow hunter, the culmination of all preparation, all stealth, all skill, came down to the moment of the shot, almost always at ranges that would seem shockingly close by modern standards. While today's compound bow hunters might confidently take shots at 40 or even 60 yards, the frontier hunter typically released his arrow at distances under 20 yards, often much closer. This wasn't merely a limitation of their equipment, though the wooden self-bow certainly lacked the velocity and flat trajectory of modern compound bows. Rather, it reflected a fundamentally different philosophy of hunting, one based on intimate knowledge of anatomy and absolute certainty of a clean kill. As noted in the Journal of a Pennsylvania Long Hunter from 1773, the Indian will not loose his arrow until he can count the eyelashes of the deer. What seems like excessive patience to the white man is merely the Indian's respect for his prey and confidence in his skill. The close-range approach required perfect shot placement. Frontiersmen learned the vital areas of different game animals in exquisite detail, understanding not just where the heart and lungs were located, but how the animal's position and angle affected the path to these organs. They knew that a deer quartering away offered a different shot opportunity than one standing broadside, and they adjusted their aim accordingly. The physical act of drawing and releasing the bow was practiced until it became instinctive. Unlike modern archery with its mechanical releases and precision sights, frontier bow hunting was done instinctively. The archer simply looked at the target and released when the shot felt right. This intuitive shooting method, similar to what we demonstrated in our Primitive Skills Challenge video, required thousands of repetitions to master, but ultimately allowed for faster, more fluid shooting in hunting situations. The moment of release was executed with absolute control. The fingers opened smoothly, allowing the string to roll off without deflecting the arrow. The bow arm remained steady through the shot, neither dropping in anticipation nor flinching at the release. The best hunters maintained their aim point even after the arrow was gone, a technique modern archers call follow-through that was understood intuitively by frontier bowmen. What made close-range shooting particularly challenging was the heightened risk of detection. At distances under 20 yards, the slightest movement, the faintest sound, or even the hunter's breath could alert the prey and send it bounding away before the shot could be taken. This required not just physical control, but extraordinary mental discipline. As one Cherokee hunter reportedly advised, "When the moment comes to draw, you must become like stone. Only your drawing arm may move, and it must move like the sun across the sky, too slow for the eye to see." The frontier bow hunter also understood the importance of shot timing. Rather than taking the first possible shot, experienced hunters would often wait for the perfect moment, when the animal was relaxed, preferably feeding with its head down and attention diverted. They recognized that a rushed shot at a nervous animal was likely to result in a miss, or worse, a wounding hit that might not be recovered. Recovery of game was another critical aspect of close-range hunting. The shorter distances meant more powerful impacts and better penetration, increasing the chances of a quick, clean kill. Frontiersmen developed sophisticated blood trailing skills, reading the color, consistency, and pattern of blood drops to determine where their arrow had struck and how quickly the animal would succumb. This knowledge, combined with remarkable tracking abilities that we explored in our video on reading sign, allowed them to recover animals that modern hunters might lose. The frontier bow hunter's approach to close-range shooting wasn't just a technique. It was an ethical framework that emphasized respect for the animal through perfect execution. By getting close enough to ensure a killing shot, they honored their prey while maximizing their chances of putting meat in the pot. The ultimate goal in a world where hunger was always just one failed hunt away. The legacy of these frontier bow hunting techniques lives on today, not just in museums or historical accounts, but in the practices of traditional bow hunters who still pursue game with wooden bows and arrows crafted by hand. Their continued success stands as testament to the effectiveness of methods refined in the crucible of frontier survival, where failure meant hunger and success meant life. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, there remains something profoundly compelling about the simplicity and effectiveness of these ancient methods. The frontier bow hunter reminds us that the most sophisticated technology is not always the most appropriate, that silence often holds more power than sound, and that patience and skill can overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. These lessons, like the carefully crafted wooden bow itself, have proven their worth across centuries of use and continue to inspire those who seek a deeper connection to the natural world and the hunting traditions that helped shape America.